Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. This video is the second part of my chat application in vanilla JavaScript tutorial with HTML and CSS. In the first part, we are building our front-end and skeleton with HTML and CSS. So if you want to learn how to do it, click on the link to the first part in the description. Today, we will be focusing on the logic behind our front-end and back-end written in JavaScript. If you are interested only in that, you can skip the first video and download all the code you need from the GitHub repository. The link to it will be also in the description. Alright, let's get to the video. We have just finished writing our front-end. So now what we want to do is we'd like to send our first message to the server and see it being sent on the server. So to do that, we first need to let our JavaScript know about these buttons and inputs, because our JavaScript doesn't see it currently. It just says hello world. So what we need to do is to define a constant of, let's say, button, and we do document get element by ID, and the ID of this button we set to send. Very self-explanatory. And we also want to have our input, so our input is going to be document get element by ID again, and the ID for this is input, of course. That's great. So yeah, we have our two inputs here, so let's add an event listener. So button add event listener. And if someone clicks our button, I'd actually want to have a function being called. So here's the function, and I'd like this function just to console log I was clicked. So let's see if that works. So I'll go to our JavaScript, refresh, click the button, and here I was clicked. So it works perfectly. Now I'd actually want also to have the input value here, just to see if we can also see what we wrote in the input. So let me actually refresh. Yeah, and as we can see, our input is also working fine. So now the main thing to install here would be to install socket.io. This is a JavaScript package which allows us basically to establish a connection between the server and the client. So it's a bit different from what we discussed in the API video, because here you don't actually have to send a request to the server to get some data back. The server sends a request to you, sort of, because it's based on an event system. So when something happens on the server, the front end, the client's computer, is notified at once, because a sort of connection tunnel is being established. It's as if you called someone on a phone and they say something over the phone and you can hear it immediately. You don't have to ask them constantly, hey, did you say something just now? So I guess this is a very simple explanation of it, but I'll show you how it works when we actually implement the logic. So the first thing would be to install our two packages that we need for this. So I'll close the server off, and the first one is socket.io. This is the package that is going to be used on the server, and the second one is socket.io-client. So obviously this one is going to be used on the client. So I'm installing those, and here we are. So let's go to the server now and actually configure our socket.io server. So the thing that we need here from the server is we need to import server from socket.io, and we need to actually start this server. So this is basically our server instance, because this app listen function actually returns a constant here, a server constant. So it can be used without anything like we used it before, but here we need to pass to the server our server instance that is returned from this app listen function. So here we are saving it just to the server constant, and we are going to now have a IO. And this IO is basically our WebSocket server. We could call it like that. So whenever anyone connects to this server, we are going to be able to handle this connection, because the normal requests that are going to this server are HTTP requests, the ones that I've described in the previous video. In this instance, if we get a WebSocket request, we are actually going to handle it with this IO, with this server, which comes from socket.io. Now, the one thing that we need to also define here is our course policy. Okay, so here I defined some options that we also need to pass down to the server. These options basically need to be set on our socket.io server to tell it that it can trust the website, to tell it that it can actually trust our server. So I'll explain more in another video, but basically this is what we need to pass to our new server here, just to allow it to function properly for our localhost port 3000 server, which is made with ExpressJS. So yeah, we have the IO here, and so what we want to define here is IO on connection, and we are going to receive a socket. This function is executed when someone connects to our server, and this is where we can actually get their socket ID and many other properties on this socket. In this instance, we'll just console log someone connected to our socket server. Okay, so let's try to connect from our JavaScript here on the client side. So the problem is that we can't use our import statements here actually, because this JavaScript file is currently being sent to the client. It's just taken, bundled with the HTML and CSS, and it's being sent to the front. So on the server, when we are using our import statements, what it actually means is that the JavaScript is searching inside the node modules folder, where it can find all of the dependencies that we are installing via npm. The problem is that the node modules are actually only on our server machine. They're not in the src file that is being, or the index.html that is being sent to the client. The client doesn't have node modules being sent over, because that would be too big to send. So what we need to do here is use something called webpack, which will actually add all of our imports directly to this file. So webpack is a tool which takes our main.js, this file, and it creates a minified version of it together with all the modules taken from the node modules that this file needs. It's a very useful tool if we actually want to use some JavaScript libraries on the front end. Let's actually install it. So I'll do npm i --save webpack and webpack.cli, which is needed to basically use it to compile our JavaScript. Here we are, we've added all of it. Now let's try to import something. So we're going to import our socket.io client, and we can use it. So const socket equals io, and this is going to be our server, so http. Now this socket can be used to emit different events. What we want to have here is we actually want to emit our message. So I will emit the thing that we have in our input here. We are going to do socket.emit, and inside of it we're going to have message, and inside of the message we're going to put the input.value, just for now. And We can remove that console log. So now we'll see if this is actually going to work. In this place, on the second line of this file, this is actually the place where the connection is being made. This instance is when on our backend, our connection fires up. So whenever someone actually will connect, this function will open up. So now we can also wait for events that the socket has sent to us. So for instance, we have defined a message event here. So let's do a socket on message, and we're going to console log this message. Yeah, we of course need to add a comma here because this is a function. We could say an inline function. All right, so yeah, we don't need this console log. I think we're gonna see this message on our server anyway. So yeah, what we need to do now is we need to build actually our front end. We need to make this into this minified file that I was talking about just before. All right, so now let's use our Webpack to compile this. So the first thing I'm going to do is type npx webpack. And we already see one error. The problem is that Webpack is actually going to search our src for an index.js file. So we need to rename this to index.js. And also, this folder name should also be src, because if I name it something else, Webpack will not know where to look. Of course, you can configure Webpack to take your custom names, but it's just easier, in my opinion, to have this sort of, to have it named just as Webpack wants. So let's do it again. Okay, and now we see that asset main.js has been emitted and minimized. So let's look. Here we see that a new folder has appeared called dist, and if I go to the main.js here, we can see that it's a jumble of JavaScript code. So this is basically what we are going to be sending to the user. And it has our IO in it just minified, so it's able to use everything. It's basically we took one of the modules that we needed here and jumbled it in here, and we can send it to the client instead of sending the entire node modules folder. So we also want actually to move our index and our styles to the dist, because this is what we're going to be sending here, and our src will be something which will be editing here to get this new version of main whenever we actually want to create some changes to this file. So I believe that now we also should update. Yeah, we have the main.js, which is good here, but our server is still having this static src file. So we'll change this to be dist, and now everything should work. So let's actually open up nodemon server.js. The server is started, and let's open up our chat application, and let's send a message. Okay, we have clicked the button, and let's see if the message appears, and here we are, success. So the message has appeared on our server. It means that basically we have access to whatever the client writes, and we have it on our socket server. All right, so now I suppose that we should add some message handling. So in our index.js file, I'll also clear the input after the message was sent. So input value is set to nothing. And also I will add one check inside of this function. So if input value is actually equal to nothing, so if someone just presses the button, I don't want this socket to emit unnecessary messages. So we need to do a comparison here. This is basically our check. Beyond this point, in our code, this function cannot continue if this if statement is true, basically. So yeah, that's what it's gonna do. Let's actually see this. So the input is 0. Let's send a message, and as we can see, nothing has changed here. We don't have any new messages. And now if I type in something, we see that we actually got this. So this is working fine. Now the one thing that we need to do here is we need to actually react in some way if we get a message. So this is a bit more complex, and it involves basically doing some work on the server. We need to handle our socket when the user connects. So basically, if we want our user to receive any messages, we need to emit something from the server. So let's say that if a user actually connects, we want to give him some sort of message back. So we will basically do socket emit, and that's how our event system can work. Here we are listening for events that have the tag message, and we ourselves can emit events with the tag, for example, welcome. And we can send over some data. So we're going to send welcome to the server, let's say. So on the front end, we need to react to this, obviously. So on the front end, we basically just do socket on. So socket on welcome. We want to have a message from the server and just console log this message. Okay, let's see if it actually works. So now I of course need to compile this file to our main.js here and then start the server. So npx webpack. Okay, great. And of course now we start our nodemon server.js. And let's see if it actually happens. So we can see already that we actually couldn't connect to the server because it was disabled for a moment here. So this is what happens when, oh yeah, we can see welcome to the server. So we connected, immediately we got a response from the server. Let's send some sort of message to the server and see, yeah, there it is, server started. So we can see that actually everything that we did here on the back end is working. So that's good. So now that we can actually emit different messages, we want to emit a message from a different user. So what happens here is we need to create a room, basically. You can take the different sockets that connected to your socket server and group them into different rooms, and then you can emit certain events to specific rooms. So basically here we of course have a normal chat room in which we'd like to emit all of the messages for this particular chat room. So in my example, I'm just going to create a basic chat room. It's going to be a static chat room. So whoever joins this socket server, whoever opens up my website, I'd actually like to join them to join this particular room. In Facebook, for example, what happens is that the user joins those chat rooms in which he is a participant of. So basically how we can do this, how a socket can join a certain room is we just type socket join and we're going to call it room 1. So on Facebook, for example, the socket would join all of the IDs that it has access to. But here, everyone will join room number 1 because this is a simplified example. So here we are basically joining to room 1, and now we can actually emit to room 1. So how we're going to do this? Pretty simple. If we get a message from a user, we're actually not going to console log this message anymore. When we get the message, we'd like to emit it to all of the sockets in room 1. So socket 2, and here we have maybe message. No, because this is actually the same, we need to say receive message, and the message is going to be here. Okay, So we have emit receive message. Let's see in our index.js. So we have already socket on welcome. We also want to have a socket on this event. So we're just waiting for the server to welcome us, and then maybe if someone sends a message to room number 1, we want to receive this message. By this time, if socket.io this connection is successful, we'll already be joined in room number 1. So here we're just listening to message, and for now we'll just go console log this message. So we'll say message. Okay, let's see if it works. Now, the one thing that I'd like to change here is instead of just typing npx webpack all the time and then nodemon server.js, I'll just have a npm start script so that I can actually start write npm start to refresh, and it's going to be easier. So we can actually define some scripts for ourselves inside of the package.json. So what we do here is we add scripts. And here we defined start. And the start should basically run npx webpack. And then after this, nodemon server.js, like that. Okay, let's try to run this script. So we can see that it did everything for me here, and the server is started. Let's refresh. Oh, I see that it's already sort of refreshed because it's all the time trying to connect to the server. So now that our server is running, it connected automatically. But this is still the old version here, so we need to refresh it. And here we're connected to the server at once. Let's send the message. We have sent the message. This has cleaned from here. But we can't see actually the message inside of our console, and we should be able to see it. So let's see what's the problem. Receive message. It looks like we didn't receive the message. Socket on message. Are we sure that we emitted the message with this. So let's see now. Let's actually console log this message just to make sure. All right, so I found out why we didn't actually see the message here. I used the wrong constant here. It's not socket, it is actually IO that we should use. So IO to room number 1, emit, receive message. And now we should be able to see the message that we sent. So let me actually refresh everything here. So npm start. And now we'll see the message pop up right here. So let me refresh that once more. Send a message, and here we can see that we received that message. So of course we received our own message, which maybe is not the best thing, but when we receive our message, we will just add it here, and when we receive a message from someone else, we're going to add it here too. So now let's just make it so that we actually add this message onto our screen. So in order to do that, we actually need to use some plain JavaScript to use on our website here. So I'm still going to keep our fake messages for now, but I'm going to open up this piece of code where we actually receive the message. And here in this place, we are going to create some HTML. So with using JavaScript, that is. So let's do this. We have our message element. So const will basically create a message. And the message will be we need to create this part of code right here. So I'll just have it pasted here. And of course comment it out. Or actually, maybe we don't need to comment it yet because we're not compiling the code yet. So we definitely need to create a element. So const message element. And this is going to be a div element. Then we want the element to have a class. So message element. and the class should be message container. Then we want to have an inner div inside of this message container, so this div. So const inner, maybe const, yeah, that's how we like that. Let's have actually message container. Let's change the names so that they make sense. Now this is message. This is gonna conflict with this, so let's just make it inner message. Inner message will be also a document create element. Okay, great. And inner message class list add message, because that's the name of the class that we want to give it. And then we are going to have two inner divs. So let's do this. Const message info. Username is going to be document create element p, and the p will have a class list of username. And also the same thing will be done for date, p and date here. Okay, now we have to do this one. So text container is equal to document create element div, and let's add a class list. And inside of it, we want to have our text paragraph. Okay, so we want the text paragraph to have the text of our message. So here we are going to set the inner text to message. Okay, and I think that should be it. Now we need to actually get the structure right. So we are going to have the message container, append child, inner message. Okay, and the inner message, so this one should have appended to this message info. And message info should have appended to it username and date. And apart from that, we'd like our message, so inner message, to have appended to it text container, and the text container itself should have appended to it the text paragraph. That's right. Okay, a lot of appending here, but I think that it should all work. Of course, the username and the date should also be added here, just like we added the message. So the date should actually have date inner text. Or let's actually withhold adding the date now. Let's see first if everything works correctly. Then we can add the date. So I'll just comment this out now. We also need to, of course, add because we have the main here, right? We have the div class messages. That's how we need to find it. We are actually sending over the data. We are appending it to this element, right? This is message container, but we're not doing anything with this message container. So we need to find a const main message container, let's say. And this is basically going to be, let's go to our HTML structure. This is actually going to be this one. So we need to add a message to this div, like these messages are added here. So the main message container is a document get element by class name. is actually get elements by class name. So we want the first element, and actually the only element, and there we want to append child. And this is going to be the message container. Okay, let's rebuild everything and see if we're successful. Yep, we can see that it's actually working, so this is good. We are appending the messages to our DOM here, to our message container basically. So we can see here that our messages are actually being sent, and they are correct, and we have our name and they're being added correctly. And the one thing is I'd like to add some margin on the bottom of each message, so this is what we're going to do. Let's go to styles and let's have our message actually, which sort of maybe message container should have a bottom border. So there it is, and let's give it a margin bottom of 10 pixels. Let's see how it looks. Let's send some messages, and here we are. This looks good. So yeah, our test message is being added here, which is good. We also need to add the correct date here. So let's actually do that. Alright, I need to rerun this again to see the changes. Okay, the server is started. Right, so we can't actually add. Oh, right, of course. I was doing the wrong thing here. I need to set the inner text, not to use it like that. So we set the inner text to a new date, just like that. So we can run this again. Open this up and send a test message. And here we are. Yeah, we have a lot of this. This date is actually quite long. It's not really nicely formatted. So we'll try to get a JavaScript package for this. Alright, so I found this very nice JavaScript library called Moment, which we're going to use. Okay, so we need to import Moment like this and have it in this sort of format. And that's how we will be able to send the moment. So of course I am refreshing our server, building the client again. There we are. Let's go to our server and send a message test. And here we are. The date is very nicely formatted with this JavaScript package. Alright, so one problem that we have here, if I actually add another user here, and let's get these two together. So if I send a message over here, it's going to simply appear as if this person sent it here. We'd actually like this to be different. What we can actually do is we can set the socket ID as the user ID, and this way we'll be able to determine what kind of person we are, if this was a message originating from us or from someone else. So when we are actually connecting, let's send not only welcome to the server, but actually the socket ID. So socket ID to the user, and the user will be able to store it in a local variable. So let my ID, or rather user ID, will be set to, well, let's say nothing for now. And on welcome, we're going to get the ID, and we're going to say that the user ID is equal to ID. Now, we actually want this function not to return this statement, but just do this. So this is going to work perfectly. Now that we have this ID, we are going to check whether the message will actually have this ID. So the message that we're sending back here, so this is our connection, right? This is our on message, and we are emitting the message to the specific room. Actually, instead of sending the message, I'd like to send the user ID, which is going to be the socket ID, and the message like this. So message is going to be message. Okay, that's good. So we have the socket ID as the message now, and we go here, and this is our message. This is actually going to be message here. So the message that we are having, let's say that this is simply response. So response dot message. And we also, while we are adding the classes, we'd like to know whether this message is from us or not. So right here, we're going to create a isOur variable, and it will basically be set to response dot user ID is equal to user ID. So this will return either true or false, depending on if the user ID is actually set correctly. Let me just check. Yeah, that's the user ID right here. So yeah, isOur, and now message container class list. So if user ID, if actually isOur, we want the class list to also contain, what do we have here? We want to contain the class called left. So there we are. And also in the inner message, do we want to change anything here? No. We want the message container to have left, and foreign, the message to be foreign. Okay, so actually if it is our, we want the message not to be on the left. So if is not our, we want to add the left, and we want to add the foreign class. So let's change it here just to see it clearly as how it should look like, because if it's foreign, it should be on the left too. So left, and here the inner message will also have the same thing. So we are also adding, like, let me actually space it out. So this is like that. This is like that. Let's just make some spaces here to see it more clearly. Okay. And yeah, we want the inner message class list to include foreign. Okay, now it should be able to determine which sort of message should it pick for our front end. So should it be Jack, or I mean, should it be presented as this, as our own message, or should it be presented as a foreign message? So let's close that off. So we're essentially doing it by receiving at the beginning of our handshake, let's say, of our communication with the server, we receive our own ID from the server, and then when we actually receive the message from the server, we also get a response in which we are actually getting from the server the user ID and the message itself. So here we are basically comparing whether our user ID here, which we assigned earlier, is compatible with what the server ID sent to us. Okay, so let's go here, let's refresh, and let's send a message. This message should appear as our own. So test send message. Yeah, it is presented as our own message. And now I'm going to open up another local host. Here also test2, let's say. So for this guy, it appeared as test2, but here it works correctly. It appeared as test2, but as a foreign message. So let's just send another message, and as we can see, it works just fine. Also, there's one more thing. You might have noticed that all of the messages have the username Jake there, and that is because I always set it to be Jake in the code, but that could be changed to be, for example, the socket ID or some name that the user could give before entering this chat, for example, if we implemented such a feature, that is. So basically, this is the entire application. If you'd like to add some rooms, it's also possible to create your own room or to enter a room ID. But this tutorial doesn't encompass that. The code to it, as I said in the beginning, will be available on GitHub. So if you want to copy this or do anything you want with this code, you're free to do so. Thank you for watching and see you next time.